You never told me you are this tight, Korean mafia boss said to his black virgin wife as he gasps for breath. The first thing Tae-Hyung Adelik noticed about Seoul was how cold it felt, not the weather but the air itself. It was sharp, disciplined, and unwelcoming, like the city had already decided she did not belong. From the tinted window of the black luxury sedan, she watched the city blur past in streaks of neon and glass. Towering skyscrapers stood like silent judges. Every intersection felt choreographed. Every passerby moved with purpose. This was nothing like Lagos. In Lagos, life sang, loud markets, laughter spilling into the streets, the scent of roasted corn and sea breeze blending in the air. Here even the wind seemed restrained. Tae-Hyung adjusted the sleeve of her cream-colored dress, her fingers trembling despite her effort to remain composed. She was not here as a visitor. She was here as a bride. A contract bride. The car slowed before a massive iron gate. Armed guards stepped forward, their faces expressionless as they scanned the vehicle. The gates opened with mechanical precision, revealing a mansion that looked less like a home and more like a fortress. Stone walls. Security cameras. Men in black suits stationed like statues. Her stomach tightened. The driver stepped out and opened her door. "Mrs. Seo," he said with a slight bow. The title felt foreign. Heavy. Tae-Hyung stepped onto the polished stone driveway, her heels clicking in the silence. The sound echoed, a reminder that every step she took now belonged to a life she hadn't chosen. Inside, the mansion was vast and immaculate. Marble floors reflected the chandelier light like frozen water. The air smelled faintly of cedar and something metallic she couldn't name. No laughter. No warmth. No sign of life beyond duty. Then she saw him. Seo-jun stood at the far end of the grand hall, flanked by two bodyguards who looked carved from stone. He didn't move toward her. He didn't smile. He simply watched. He was taller than she expected. Broad-shouldered. Impeccably dressed in a dark suit that seemed tailored to his authority. His face was striking, sharp jawline, unreadable eyes, and a calmness that felt more dangerous than rage. This was the man whose name men whispered in fear across Asia. The man she was now bound to. Tae-Hyung forced her feet to move forward. Each step felt like crossing a line she could never uncross. When she stopped a few feet from him, the silence stretched, thick, suffocating. Seo-jun finally spoke. "Miss Adelik." His voice was deep, controlled, and colder than the Seoul air. She lifted her chin. "It's Mrs. Seo now, isn't it?" A flicker of something, surprise? Amusement? Passed through his eyes, gone before she could be sure. He gestured toward a sleek glass table where documents lay neatly arranged. "This marriage is a strategic alliance," he said. "Your family gains protection. My organization gains access. There will be no interference in each other's personal affairs." Protection. The word sounded like a cage with a prettier name. Tae-Hyung approached the table. The contract lay open, her name already printed beside his. She thought of her father's failing business. The threats. The desperation in her mother's voice during their last call. This marriage was the price of survival. Her hand hovered over the pen. "Do I have a choice?" she asked quietly. Seo-jun met her gaze, unflinching. "Everyone has a choice. But choices have consequences." She let out a slow breath and picked up the pen. The ink flowed smoothly, sealing her fate with a single stroke. When she finished, Seo-jun signed without hesitation. A bodyguard stepped forward, collecting the contract like it was a sacred artifact. And just like that, Tae-Hyung Adelik ceased to exist. In her place stood Mrs. Seo, wife to a mafia boss. "The rules?" Seo-jun turned to her, his expression unchanged. "You will have your own wing. Staff will attend to your needs. You are not to leave the estate without escort." Tae-Hyung frowned. "Am I a wife or a prisoner?" His gaze hardened slightly. "You are under my protection. That distinction keeps you alive. Alive. Not happy. Not free. Alive." She swallowed her retort. Showing fear would only give him power. Showing defiance might cost her safety. "Understood," she said. He studied her for a moment, longer than necessary, as if trying to decipher something he did not expect to find. Strength perhaps. Or refusal to break. A silent welcome. As a maid guided Tae-Hyung toward the grand staircase, she felt the weight of unseen eyes. Every camera. Every guard. Every whisper in a language she barely understood. Halfway up the stairs, she paused and glanced back. Seo-jun still stood in the hall watching her. Not with desire. Not with kindness. But with a calculating intensity that made her spine stiffen. This man had built his world on control. And now she was part of it. alone in a golden cage. Her new room was larger than her family's entire home in Lagos. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked manicured gardens, silk sheets, fresh orchids, a wardrobe filled with designer clothes in her exact size. Luxury without comfort. Tae-Hyung ran her fingers over the fabric of a gown she had never chosen. "They bought my life down to the measurements," she murmured. When the door closed behind the maid, the silence returned, heavier than before. For the first time since arriving, Tae-Hyung allowed herself to feel the truth she had been holding back. She was alone in a foreign country, married to a man whose hands were stained with power and blood. And yet, as she stood by the window watching the distant city lights flicker like restless stars, a strange resolve settled in her chest. She had not crossed continents to disappear. If this mansion was a cage, she would learn its locks. If this marriage was a contract, she would rewrite its terms. And if Seo-jun believed she would simply exist quietly at his side, he was about to learn exactly who Tae-Hyung Adelik was. Morning arrived without warmth. The sunlight that slipped through Tae-Hyung's floor-to-ceiling windows was pale and distant, filtered through Seoul's winter haze. It illuminated the room's perfection, the silk sheets untouched on one side, the neatly arranged slippers beside the bed, the orchids still impossibly fresh. Nothing in this house looked lived in. Tae-Hyung sat at the edge of the bed, her bare feet pressed against the cold marble floor. For a moment she closed her eyes and imagined the sounds of Lagos. Danfo horns blaring, neighbors arguing, street vendors calling out their wares. Here there was only silence. Not peaceful silence. Controlled silence. The watchful walls. A soft knock came at the door. "Madam," a maid said in careful English, bowing slightly. "Breakfast is ready." Tae-Hyung followed her through the corridors, her steps echoing in the vast space. The mansion seemed endless, hallways branching into more hallways, doors closed like secrets, security cameras perched in corners like unblinking eyes. She tested one door as they passed. Locked. Another. Locked. The maid pretended not to notice. "Are all the doors in this house locked?" Tae-Hyung asked. The maid hesitated. "For safety, madam." Safety again. A word that meant everything and nothing. Breakfast without appetite. The dining room could have seated 20 people, yet only one place was set. A long mahogany table. A single porcelain plate. Silver cutlery arranged with surgical precision. Tae-Hyung sat slowly. A spread of food lay before her, fresh fruit, pastries, eggs, tea, all flawless, all untouched. "Does he always eat alone?" she asked. The maid bowed her head. "Chairman Seo eats when his schedule allows." Chairman. Not husband. Not Seo-jun. Not a man. A title. A position. A force. Tae-Hyung lifted her teacup, but her appetite had abandoned her somewhere between Lagos and this cold palace. The sound of power. She had just set the cup down when a sharp noise shattered the silence. Pop. Another. Pop. Gunshots. The porcelain cup slipped from her fingers and shattered against the floor. Every servant froze. No one screamed. No one ran. No one even looked surprised. Tae-Hyung's heart pounded against her ribs. "What was that?" The maid spoke calmly. "Training exercises, madam." Training. The word echoed in Tae-Hyung's mind as dread crawled up her spine. This was not a home. It was a fortress preparing for war. The Garden of Illusions. Later, determined not to suffocate in marble and silence, Tae-Hyung stepped into the gardens. They were immaculate. Trimmed hedges, a koi pond still as glass, stone lanterns placed with mathematical precision. Even nature here had been disciplined. She crouched near the pond, watching the koi glide beneath the surface. "They look free," she murmured, "but they never leave the water they're given. Freedom is an illusion." The voice behind her was deep and controlled. Tae-Hyung turned. Seo-jun stood a few steps away, his coat draped over his shoulders, his presence as commanding as the mansion itself. Her pulse quickened, not from fear alone, but from the unsettling awareness of him. "You startled me," she said. "That will keep you alive," he replied. A conversation of edges. They stood in silence for a moment, the cold air hanging between them. "You run drills with live ammunition in your garden?" Tae-Hyung asked. His gaze didn't waver. "Better here than at our gates." "Our?" The word struck her. "This is your world," she said. "I'm just surviving in it." Seo-jun studied her face as if searching for weakness. "You are safer here than anywhere else," he said. "My enemies do not forgive. They do not forget. And now they know your name." A chill swept through her. "So I traded one danger for another?" she whispered. "No," he said quietly. "You traded uncertainty for protection." Crack in the armor. A distant shout echoed from the training grounds. Seo-jun's head turned instinctively, his posture shifting, alert, predatory. For the first time, Tae-Hyung saw the man beneath the suit, a warrior who trusted nothing, a leader who carried the weight of survival on his shoulders. "Do you ever rest?" she asked. "Rest is a liability. And living like this isn't?" He looked at her then, truly looked, as if she had asked a question no one had dared to voice. "Living is irrelevant," he said. "Winning is what matters." Tae-Hyung shook her head softly. "That sounds like a very lonely victory." For a fraction of a second, something flickered in his eyes. Gone before she could name it. The invisible cage. That evening, as Tae-Hyung returned to her room, she noticed something new. A guard posted outside her door. He bowed. "For your protection, madam." She forced a polite smile and entered her room. The door closed with a soft click. Then another sound. A lock sliding into place, from the outside. Tae-Hyung stood frozen. Her chest tightened, the reality settling like iron around her ribs. Protection. Safety. Survival. All different names for the same thing. Control. She walked to the window and pressed her palm against the glass, staring at the distant city lights she could not reach. Somewhere in the mansion, footsteps echoed. Doors opened and closed. Voices murmured in Korean. A world moving around her. A life she was not part of. But as she stood there, breathing slowly, something hardened inside her. She was not fragile porcelain. She was steel wrapped in silk. And if this house was full of shadows, she would learn how to see in the dark. Night in the mansion did not fall, it descended. By the time darkness settled over the estate, the halls had grown quieter, the shadows longer, and the air heavier, as if the house itself were holding its breath. Tae-Hyung sat near her window, a book open in her lap, unread. Her eyes drifted instead to the security lights sweeping across the gardens below in slow, mechanical arcs. Guards patrolled in precise routes, their movements synchronized like a silent choreography. She was beginning to understand. Nothing here was accidental. Not the silence. Not the locks. Not the fear that lived beneath every polished surface. A warning in the air. A sudden vibration rippled through the glass beneath her fingertips. Headlights. 3 black SUVs sped through the front gates, tires crunching against gravel. Men poured out before the vehicles fully stopped, their movements sharp, urgent. Not the calm precision she had grown used to. This was different. This was alarm. Her door burst open without warning. The guard stationed outside stepped in, his voice tight. "Madam, please remain inside." "Why?" Tae-Hyung demanded, rising to her feet. He hesitated, just long enough to confirm her worst fear. Potential threat. The door shut again. Locked. Tae-Hyung's pulse roared in her ears. The sound of violence. At first it was distant. A shout. Running footsteps. A crash, glass shattering somewhere below. Then, gunfire. Not controlled training shots. Chaos. Tae-Hyung stumbled back from the window, her breath coming fast. The sounds echoed through the mansion's bones, sharp bursts followed by shouting in Korean she couldn't understand. Her mind raced. This is his world. This is what you married into. Another gunshot rang closer this time, followed by a cry cut short. Her stomach twisted. The door that wouldn't stay closed. The handle of her door rattled violently. Tae-Hyung froze. The guard outside shouted something. A scuffle. A heavy thud. Then silence. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Slowly, too slowly, the door creaked open. A man she had never seen before staggered into the room. Blood stained his sleeve. His eyes were wild, desperate. He spoke rapidly in Korean, his gaze locking onto her like he had found something valuable. Something to use. Tae-Hyung backed away, her legs trembling but her mind sharp. "I don't understand you," she said, her voice unsteady but firm. He took a step forward. Another. She reached blindly behind her, her hand closing around the nearest object. A heavy crystal vase. The man lunged. The mafia boss arrives. Before he could reach her, the sound of a gunshot exploded in the room. The intruder dropped. Tae-Hyung gasped, the vase slipping from her grasp and shattering at her feet. Seo-jun stood in the doorway, gun still raised, his expression carved from stone. 2 of his men rushed past him, securing the body with efficient brutality. The room smelled of gunpowder and iron. For a moment Tae-Hyung couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Seo-jun lowered the gun slowly, his gaze sweeping over her, checking for injuries with clinical precision. "You were supposed to stay secured," he said to the men behind him, his voice deadly quiet. "They breached the east corridor, Chairman." We are containing the situation. Contain it faster, he replied. They disappeared, dragging the body away as if it weighed nothing. The first crack. Silence returned, but it was no longer the controlled silence of before. It was the aftermath of violence. Seo-jun stepped into the room. His presence filled the space, overwhelming, unyielding. Are you hurt? He asked. The question startled her. No, she whispered. He nodded once, tension still coiled in his shoulders. You should not have been reachable. His voice carried something new. Not anger. Concern. Fear meets defiance. Tae-Hyung found her voice beneath the shock. You told me I was safe, she said, her hands trembling at her sides. A man just died in my bedroom. Seo-jun didn't flinch. And you are alive. The words struck like ice. Is that enough for you? She demanded. His jaw tightened. It has to be. She stared at him, searching his face for any sign of regret. Do you enjoy this? She asked quietly. Living like every breath is borrowed? His eyes darkened. Enjoyment has nothing to do with survival. The same words he had spoken before. But now she understood their weight. A bullet meant for her. A sudden crack split the air, glass exploding inward from the window behind her. Tae-Hyung felt the rush of air before she understood. A sniper shot. Seo-jun moved faster than thought. He grabbed her, pulling her down as another bullet struck the wall where her head had been moments before. She crashed against his chest, the force knocking the breath from her lungs. His arms locked around her, shielding her completely. More shouting echoed outside. Return fire. Orders barked in sharp Korean commands. But inside the circle of his arms, there was only the thunder of his heartbeat, fast, fierce, human. Too human. Too close to let go. They remained like that for several seconds. Or minutes. Time had lost meaning. Tae-Hyung became acutely aware of everything. The warmth of his body, the steady strength of his hold, the faint scent of smoke and cedar clinging to his clothes. He was holding her too tightly. As if letting go meant losing her. Stay close to me, he whispered. The words were not an order. They were a plea. After the storm. When the gunfire finally faded into the distance, Seo-jun loosened his grip, but did not step away. His hands lingered at her shoulders as though confirming she was real. Alive. Unharmed. For the first time Tae-Hyung saw it clearly. Behind the ruthless leader was a man terrified of losing control. And now losing her. She swallowed, her voice barely audible. This is your world, she said. But I'm in it now. His gaze searched hers. Yes, he replied. You are. Not a contract. Not an obligation. A presence he could no longer ignore. A new reality. Later, after the windows were secured and additional guards stationed, Tae-Hyung sat on the edge of her bed, wrapped in a blanket she did not remember taking. Her hands still trembled. Her bedroom no longer felt like a gilded cage. It felt like a battlefield. Yet beneath the fear, something else stirred, something dangerous in its own way. She had seen Seo-jun's violence. But she had also felt his urgency. His fear. His need to protect her. And that frightened her more than the gunfire. Because it meant this marriage was becoming something neither of them had planned. The mansion smelled faintly of smoke for 2 days after the attack. No matter how wide the windows were opened or how often the staff polished the marble floors, the scent lingered, a ghost of violence woven into the air. Tae-Hyung noticed everything now. The doubled guards. The new cameras installed overnight. The way servants avoided eye contact, moving like whispers along the walls. And Seo-jun? He became a shadow. Present everywhere. Visible nowhere. Sleepless nights. Sleep no longer came easily. Every creak of the mansion's bones sounded like a footstep. Every gust of wind against the glass felt like the prelude to another bullet. On the third night, Tae-Hyung sat curled on the window seat, wrapped in a shawl, watching the security lights sweep across the gardens. Her reflection stared back at her, strong posture, steady gaze, but her eyes told the truth. She was afraid. Not of death. Of disappearing into this life without ever being seen. The unexpected darkness. That evening as she descended the staircase for dinner, the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then darkness swallowed the mansion whole. A collective murmur rippled through the halls. Emergency lights glowed dimly along the baseboards, casting long, distorted shadows that made the familiar corridors feel foreign. Tae-Hyung's heart quickened. A blackout meant vulnerability. Vulnerability meant danger. Before panic could take root, a calm, familiar voice emerged from the shadows. Backup generators will activate shortly. Seo-jun stepped into the faint emergency glow, his face half lit, half obscured. Without the harsh overhead lights, he looked less like a commander and more like a man carved from fatigue and responsibility. "You're not alarmed?" she asked. "I am always alarmed," he replied. Candlelight conversations. The generators took longer than expected. Staff placed candles in the dining room, their flames trembling with each subtle draft. For the first time since her arrival, Tae-Hyung and Seo-jun sat across from each other at the same table. Not as contract partners. Not as strategist and asset. Just two people illuminated by fragile light. The silence between them was different tonight, softer, uncertain. "You can sit," he said, noticing her hesitation. "I wasn't sure if this was another rule," she replied. A faint curve touched his lips, gone almost immediately. "You are allowed to eat." She sat. For several minutes, the only sounds were the quiet clink of cutlery and the soft hiss of candle flames. Then, unexpectedly, "You were brave," he said. Tae-Hyung looked up. "I was terrified. Bravery is acting despite fear." She studied him. "Is that how you live?" His gaze dropped briefly to the table. "It is the only way I know." Walls begin to fracture. The candlelight softened his features, revealing shadows beneath his eyes she had never noticed. "You don't have to be stone all the time," she said gently. His hand stilled. "And you don't have to pretend you're not afraid," he replied. The words landed between them, heavy with truth. Tae-Hyung exhaled slowly. "I am afraid." The admission felt like stepping off a ledge. He didn't look surprised. "I know," he said quietly. A shared vulnerability. A gust of wind rattled the windows. The candles flickered wildly, and instinctively Tae-Hyung's hand tightened around the edge of the table. Seo-jun noticed. "I have reinforced the perimeter," he said. "It will not happen again." "You can't promise that," she replied. "No," he admitted. "But I can promise that I will stand between you and anything that tries." The simplicity of the statement stole her breath. "Why?" she asked. He hesitated, the first true hesitation she had ever seen from him. "Because," he stopped, searching for a word he did not use. "Because you are under my protection." It was not the answer she wanted. But it was the only one he could give. The moment that changed everything. The wind howled suddenly, forcing a window latch loose. The sharp bang made Tae-Hyung flinch. Before she realized what she was doing, she reached across the table and grabbed Seo-jun's hand. The contact shocked them both. His skin was warm, solid, real. For a moment, neither of them moved. Tae-Hyung started to pull away, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I..." His fingers closed around hers. Not tightly, not possessively, but deliberately. "You don't have to apologize for fear," he said. Her pulse quickened. "You don't have to hide yours either," she replied. Their eyes met, not as strangers bound by contract, but as two people standing at the edge of something neither understood. The man behind the myth. The generators finally roared to life. Lights flooded the dining room, harsh and revealing. Seo-jun released her hand immediately, the moment slipping away like breath in winter air. But something had changed. The distance between them, once vast and unbreakable, now held a fracture. A crack in the ice. A confession in the hallway. As they left the dining room, Tae-Hyung spoke before she could lose her courage. "You said living doesn't matter. Only winning," she said. "What happens when you win?" He stopped. For several seconds he did not turn around. Finally he answered, "I have never considered that I might." The honesty in his voice startled her more than any gunshot. For the first time Tae-Hyung saw the truth clearly. Seo-jun wasn't fighting to live. He was fighting because he did not know how to stop. Alone but not the same. That night, as Tae-Hyung lay in bed, the mansion felt different. Still guarded. Still dangerous. Still a world built on shadows. But somewhere within its cold walls, a small warmth had sparked. She had seen his humanity. He had seen her fear. And neither of them had turned away. As sleep finally claimed her, one thought lingered. Perhaps the most dangerous thing in this house was not the enemies outside its gates, but the way her heart had begun to soften toward the man who ruled it. The invitation arrived in a black envelope sealed with silver wax. No note. No explanation. Just a single card embossed with elegant Korean script and a time. Tae-Hyung turned the card over in her fingers, her reflection faint in its glossy surface. "A gala?" she asked the house manager. "Yes, madam," he replied. "An important event. Chairman Seo requests your presence." Requests. Not orders. Not rules. Presence. Her pulse stirred at the unfamiliar phrasing. Transformation. Her room became a whirlwind of quiet efficiency. Stylists arrived with garment bags and velvet cases. A makeup artist bowed before touching her face. A hairstylist worked with reverence as if preparing royalty. When the gown was finally revealed, Tae-Hyung forgot how to breathe. It was deep emerald silk, flowing like liquid, with a fitted bodice that embraced her figure and a subtle slit that whispered elegance rather than display. The color glowed against her dark skin, rich and radiant. "You look magnificent," the stylist murmured. Tae-Hyung met her own gaze in the mirror. For the first time since arriving in Seoul, she did not see a contract bride. She saw Tae-Hyung idyllic. Oh, powerful. Unapologetically present. His reaction. The grand staircase curved like a question mark into the foyer below. Seo-jun stood at its base, dressed in a black tuxedo so precise it seemed engineered rather than tailored. He checked his watch once, then looked up. And stilled. Tae-Hyung descended slowly, each step measured, her hand gliding along the polished railing. The air shifted. The guards looked away. The staff lowered their eyes. But Seo-jun did not move. Did not blink. His gaze followed her as if recalibrating everything he thought he knew. When she reached the final step, they stood inches apart. "You are staring," she said softly. "You are different," he replied. A faint smile touched her lips. "Is that a compliment, Chairman Seo?" He hesitated, then quietly. "Yes." The world outside the fortress. The gala was held in a towering glass hotel overlooking the Han River. Crystal lights shimmered overhead, and the city stretched beyond the windows like a sea of stars. Tae-Hyung felt eyes on her the moment they entered. Whispers. Curious glances. Appraising looks. She did not understand the language, but she understood the tone. Who is she? The foreign wife. The woman beside the man no one touches. Seo-jun's hand hovered near the small of her back, not quite touching but ready. A silent reassurance. "You may stay close," he murmured. "Is that another rule?" she teased. "No," he said. "A preference." The dance. Music swelled, a slow orchestral piece that filled the ballroom with restrained elegance. Couples moved to the floor. Seo-jun turned to her. "Dance with me." It was not a question. Tae-Hyung placed her hand in his. His palm was warm, steady, the hand of a man who commanded empires, now guiding her gently into the rhythm. His other hand settled at her waist. The contact was electric. Not possessive. Not forceful. Certain. They moved in silence at first, the world fading to the soft glide of steps and the quiet exchange of breath. "You dance well," he said. "I learn quickly," she replied. He almost smiled. The first slip. A turn. A pivot. The polished floor caught the edge of her heel. Tae-Hyung stumbled. Before she could fall, Seo-jun's arm tightened around her waist, pulling her firmly against him. Her palm pressed against his chest. His breath hitched just slightly. They froze. Too close. Too aware. The world resumed around them, but neither moved. His voice, when it came, was lower than before. "You never told me, you hold on this tight." Her cheeks warmed. "I was trying not to fall. And now." Her fingers remained curled in his lapel. "Now," she admitted, "I'm not sure I want to let go." The confession hung between them, fragile and dangerous. A shift in power. Across the ballroom, a group of men watched them with poorly disguised interest. Seo-jun noticed. His posture changed, subtle but unmistakable. His hand at her waist became firmer, drawing her closer, a silent declaration. What? The realization startled Tae-Hyung, not because of his claim but because part of her felt safe within it. "You're tense," she whispered. "They are assessing you," he replied. "Let them," she said. "They will find I am not easily measured." His gaze flickered to her, something like admiration surfacing. "Yes," he said. "I believe that." The moment everyone saw. As the music ended, he did not release her immediately. The room noticed. The feared mafia boss, a man known for distance, lingered. For her. Whispers spread like wildfire. Tae-Hyung felt it, the shift in perception. She was no longer the foreign accessory. She was the woman who had reached the man no one could touch. The ride home. The car ride back was quiet, the city lights sliding across the tinted windows. Tae-Hyung watched their reflections side by side. "You didn't have to stay so close," she said. "I did," he replied. "Because of appearances?" He turned to her. "No," he said. "Because I wanted to." Her breath caught. A dangerous awareness. At the mansion entrance, he offered his hand to help her out of the car. She took it. Neither let go immediately. The night air was cold, but the space between them felt warm, charged with something unspoken. "Good night, Tae-Hyung," he said. It was the first time he had spoken her name without formality. "Good night, Seo-jun." His name felt unfamiliar and intimate on her lips. He watched her ascend the staircase just as he had on her first night, but this time, his gaze held no calculation. Only a quiet, undeniable pull. Alone with the truth. Inside her room, Tae-Hyung leaned against the closed door, her heart racing. She touched her waist where his hand had rested. The warmth lingered. This marriage had begun as strategy. It had become survival. Now, it was transforming into something far more dangerous. Desire. Trust. Attachment. And in Seo-jun's world, those were the most dangerous weapons of all. The night the mansion burned began with an uneasy calm. No alarms. No gunfire. No whispers over hidden radios. Just silence, too complete, too deliberate. Tae-Hyung had learned to fear this kind of quiet. A feeling she couldn't name. She stood by her window, watching the security lights sweep across the estate grounds. The rhythm was familiar now, predictable. Until it wasn't. One light blinked out. Then another. Her chest tightened. Moments later, the backup lights snapped on, but the pattern had changed. Guards moved faster, their formations tightening. Something was wrong. The door to her room opened abruptly. Seo-jun stepped inside. Not composed. Not distant. Alert. "Put on your shoes," he said. "We may need to move quickly." Her pulse spiked. "What's happening?" "An intrusion attempt," he replied. "Stay close to me." The words echoed their first night of violence, but this time she moved without hesitation. The first explosion. The blast came from the east wing. The floor trembled. Glass shattered somewhere below. The faint scent of smoke seeped into the air vents, curling into her lungs. "Was that?" "Yes," Seo-jun said, already guiding her toward the door. "They are forcing entry." His hand closed around hers, firm, unyielding. Not just protection. Connection. A fortress under siege. The hallways were alive with motion. Guards ran in coordinated lines. Radios crackled with rapid Korean commands. Emergency lights painted the walls in pulsing red. Tae-Hyung's heart pounded, but she did not freeze. She stayed beside him. Exactly where he told her to be. Another explosion rocked the building. The lights flickered violently before stabilizing. Smoke began to creep along the ceiling. "They're using fire to flush us out," Seo-jun muttered. "You sound almost impressed," she said, breathless. "I respect strategy," he replied. "Even now. Even here." He was a commander first. Fire in the walls. They reached a secure corridor when flames burst through a doorway ahead, devouring the polished wood in seconds. Heat roared toward them. Tae-Hyung instinctively stepped back, but Seo-jun stepped forward, positioning himself between her and the fire. His coat came off, wrapped around her shoulders to shield her from the heat and smoke. "Stay behind me," he ordered. "You'll get burned," she protested. "I will heal," he said. "You might not." The matter-of-fact certainty stole her argument. The blow meant for her. They were almost through the corridor when a masked attacker emerged from the smoke, weapon raised. Everything slowed. Tae-Hyung saw the gun. Saw the aim. Saw the trajectory. At her. Seo-jun moved before the shot was fired. He shoved her aside, turning his body into a shield. The gun discharged. A sharp gasp escaped him. Time snapped back into motion. Guards neutralized the attacker within seconds, dragging the body away. Orders rang out. The corridor was secured. But Tae-Hyung heard none of it. Her focus narrowed to Seo-jun. To the dark stain spreading across his sleeve. Panic and truth. "Seo-jun," she whispered, her voice breaking. He remained standing, jaw clenched, breath controlled, but she could see the strain. "It's a graze," he said. "We must keep moving." "You were shot," she cried. "It is nothing. It is not nothing to me." The words escaped before she could stop them. He froze. Not from pain. From her confession. The escape. They reached a reinforced safe room deep within the mansion's core. Steel doors sealed behind them with a heavy finality. Inside, the air was clean. Quiet. Isolated from the chaos beyond. Only the two of them remained. And the truth neither could avoid. Tending wounds. Tae-Hyung's hands trembled as she opened the emergency medical kit. "Sit," she ordered. Seo-jun obeyed without argument. She carefully peeled back his sleeve. The wound was shallow but angry, blood slick against his skin. Her chest tightened. "You said it was nothing," she murmured. "It is survivable." "That is not the same thing." Her fingers were gentle as she cleaned the wound, her touch steady despite the storm inside her. Seo-jun watched her, not the wound, not the bandage. The way her brows drew together in concentration. The way her lips pressed into a thin line to hold back fear. "You are crying," he said quietly. She blinked, surprised to feel tears sliding down her cheeks. "I told myself I wouldn't," she whispered. "Not in this house. Not in this life." "Why?" "Because weakness gets you swallowed." He held her gaze. "You are not weak." The confession. Her hand stilled against his arm. "Why did you do it?" she asked. "Why step in front of the bullet?" He did not answer immediately. Seo-jun, the man who always had a strategy, a command, a solution, silent. Finally. "Because you are no longer part of a contract," he said. "You are my responsibility." Tae-Hyung shook her head. "That's not it." His jaw tightened. "You are my—" He stopped. The word refused to come. She leaned closer, her forehead nearly touching his. "Say it," she whispered. His breath trembled, the first crack in the armor of a man who feared nothing but loss. "You are my heart," he said. The words hung in the air, fragile and irreversible. No more distance. Tae-Hyung pressed her forehead to his, her hands gripping his shirt as if anchoring herself to something real. "You terrify me," she admitted. "I know. This world terrifies me. I know. But losing you," her voice broke, "that would destroy me." His hands rose to her shoulders, hesitant, as if afraid she might vanish. "I do not know how to be anything but dangerous," he confessed. "But for you, I want to learn how to live." Her arms wrapped around him then, holding him tightly, not from fear but from choice. From love neither of them had planned. Fire outside, peace within. Beyond the steel walls, the mansion still burned. Orders were shouted. Sirens wailed. The Empire fought to survive. But inside the safe room, time slowed. Two people who had begun as strangers now held each other as if the world itself depended on it. And perhaps, for them, it did. A new beginning forged in flame. When the all-clear finally sounded, neither moved immediately. The fire had taken part of the mansion. But it had destroyed something else too. The final wall between them. Seo-jun was no longer just her protector. And Tae-Hyung was no longer just his responsibility. They had become each other's reason to survive. Dawn came quietly, as if the world itself were cautious after the night's destruction. Smoke still curled from the east wing of the mansion, rising in thin gray ribbons against the pale Seoul sky. The air smelled of ash and rain, the automatic sprinklers having long since fallen silent. What had once been an impenetrable fortress now bore scars, shattered windows, blackened stone, and the unmistakable mark of survival paid for in fire. Yet the mansion still stood. And so did they. Morning after war. Tae-Hyung stood on the balcony outside her room, wrapped in a wool coat draped over her shoulders. Below, staff and guards moved with purposeful efficiency, clearing debris, reinforcing barriers, restoring order. This was how empires healed. Not with grief. With action. Footsteps approached behind her, steady, familiar. She didn't turn. "I thought you would be in a strategy meeting," she said softly. "I delegated," Seo-jun replied. The admission alone spoke volumes. He joined her at the railing, his presence warm against the morning chill. His arm was bandaged, his movements careful but controlled. "You should be resting," she added. "I rest when my world is secure." "And is it?" He looked at her then, not at the estate, not at the guards. "You are alive," he said. "So yes." The weight of choice. They stood in silence, watching the sun struggle through the haze. After a moment, Seo-jun spoke. "If you wish to leave, I will arrange it." The words were calm, controlled. But she heard what lay beneath them. "I will let you go even if it breaks me." Tae-Hyung turned slowly to face him. "Leave?" she repeated. "You did not choose this life," he said. "You were brought into it through obligation and necessity. Last night proved the danger will not end." His jaw tightened. "I will not cage you here." The irony was not lost on her. Her answer. Tae-Hyung stepped closer, searching his face. The man who had once been an untouchable force, now standing before her with quiet vulnerability. "I crossed oceans to be here," she said. "Not for the contract. Not for protection." His brow furrowed. "Then why?" She reached for his hand. This time he did not hesitate to hold hers. "For you," she said. The words settled into him like something long denied. "You deserve a choice," he insisted, though his grip tightened. "I am choosing," she replied. "I am choosing you." A different kind of strength. Emotion flickered across Seo-jun's face, Not the explosive rage of battle but something far more unfamiliar. Relief, fear, hope. You do not understand what it means to stand beside me, he said. My enemies will become yours. Tae-Hyung's chin lifted. Then they will learn my name. A slow breath left him, almost a laugh. You are unlike anyone I have ever known. And you, she said, are not as unbreakable as you pretend. He glanced at his bandaged arm. I am difficult to destroy. She squeezed his hand. Good. Because I am not done with you. Rebuilding more than walls. Days passed. The mansion repaired its wounds piece by piece. New glass replaced shattered panes. Burned corridors were restored with stronger materials. Security doubled, then tripled. But the most profound reconstruction happened in quieter ways. Shared breakfast, unscripted conversations, moments of stillness without fear. Seo-jun began returning to the dining table, not out of duty but because she was there. Tae-Hyung learned the rhythms of his world, not as a prisoner but as a partner. The staff noticed. The guards noticed. The underworld noticed. The mafia boss who had ruled through fear alone now had something new. Someone to live for. The world takes note. At the first public appearance after the attack, whispers followed them like wine through tall grass. Not about the fire. Not about the rivals. About them. Seo-jun did not walk ahead of her. He did not leave her behind. He walked beside her. And when cameras flashed, he did not release her hand. Power had found its equal. A promise without words. That night, back at the mansion, they stood in the garden where koi fish glided beneath the water's surface. The same pond where she had once compared herself to a creature trapped in a controlled world. Now, the water reflected two figures standing shoulder to shoulder. Do you regret it? He asked. Marrying you? She replied. He nodded. Tae-Hyung watched the koi ripple the water before answering. No, she said. Because cages can become homes, when you are not alone in them. His hand found hers in the darkness. Not out of protection. Out of belonging. Love forged in steel. The world they lived in had not changed. Enemies still watched from the shadows. Power still demanded sacrifice. Danger still lingered beyond every gate. But something stronger than fear now lived within those walls. Trust. Trust. Love forged not in softness but in fire and steel. Seo-jun, the man who had once believed survival was victory, finally understood. Living was not weakness. And Tae-Hyung Adelique, the woman who crossed continents as a contract bride, had become the heart of an empire built on shadows. Far beyond the mansion walls, new alliances were forming. Old enemies were regrouping. The attack had not been a defeat, it had been a warning. A greater storm was coming. But this time, Seo-jun would not face it alone. Because beside him stood a woman who had chosen his world, and who was strong enough to help him change it.